You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 587, where tonight we are going to celebrate Christmas in a way that we've done traditionally here on the show. This is going to be a breakdown of a story called An Old Hope, which came out of Life Day Treasury back in 2021. And to do that, with me is Lauren, who joined me last year for this show. Another story that we did on Life Day Treasury, which seems to be the gift that keeps on giving. But Lauren, welcome to the show. Happy holidays. How are you doing tonight?
I'm great. I'm in the Christmas spirit right now. I'm feeling very festive, so I'm happy to be here.
And we wore our ugly Star Wars ugly sweaters again.
This is a tradition, I guess, that we have to wear the Vader ugly sweater when we do the Christmas special.
And I told Lauren I bought a new one because I was like, I'm not going to wear the same one I wore last year. That'd be kind of tacky. And I put it on. It was like a medium. It was like way too small. So I was like, I'm not putting that on because no one wants to see that. But I put on the tried and true Vader from last year as well. But anyways, hey, before we get started, I have a surprise for you. And I didn't tell you about this on air, so don't freak out because I know I don't want to send your anxiety up levels. But
I'm scared.
I told you I was going to send you your Christmas gift this year, and I haven't mailed it off yet because I wanted to show it on air. And I don't know if you have this already, so I really apologize in advance if you do. But I went and picked up the Glass Abyss.
I don't have it.
And you can't tell because of my lighting, but this is the Inkstone version.
Oh, my God.
So this is the one that has the embossed Mace Windu lightsaber on the front of it. Yeah.
Oh, my God.
And it's got the purple pages, and it's signed on the inside and all that. So Merry Christmas, Lauren. Amazing. I'll send this to you very soon.
Thank you. And I loved that book. I loved that book, too. So that's amazing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I was worried because I saw it above your head when you did the breakdown video for Tempest Breaker. And I thought, oh, my God, she bought the book and I already bought it for her. So
no, that's just the regular copy? Regular copy. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Then I did good there. All right. But yeah, so let's so Merry Christmas to you. I'll mail that off and you can put it up there and have fun with it. So it's a great book. And it's a great book the way it's created too. The Inkstone does a really, really good job with these. So
yeah, that looks like a super nice edition.
Yeah. Okay. So back to the show and the business. Before we get into all of this, I want to say thank you to all of our Patreon members, especially Alex, Raphael, Danny, Mike Borda, Lauren, thank you. Dante, Riss Bayless, Justin Jackson, Sharkman Dan, Daz, Isabella, Uncle Leon, Josh C, Jacob, and Rita Reborn. Those are they're all members of our now part of the tribe members, and our Delusions of Grandeur members, which are Rod Racing, CJ, Steve, and Rob. If you guys are interested in Patreon, you can head out to cantinacast.com/Patreon. You can sign up there for as little as $2, and there's an entire back catalog of tons and tons of episodes that we've done on just about everything over the years that are exclusive to Patreon members only. And speaking of Patreon, after this show, Jonesy and I are going to come back and we're going to do the very first Skeleton Crew Patreon show where we're going to break down at Atten in a very in a way that we haven't done so far. Like we spent some time talking about it on the show earlier this week, but this is going to be a real deep dive into the empirical knowledge, empirical facts that we have of Atten and really speculate and theorize on what all this kind of means. It literally has become like the sixth member of the Skeleton Crew that everyone seems to be talking about. So that's going to be a lot of fun to really get into the weeds on Atten. Again, that'll be at 10 p.m. Central right after this show, exclusive to Patreon members. If you're a Patreon member, there's an email that went out, or you can go onto the app that'll have a special link for you guys to hit and jump over to that show when we go live. And last thing is you've got a review out for something here. What's the most recent thing that you've put out over on cantinacast.com or the YouTube channel for Cantina Cast?
Yes, so on Wednesday, I dropped my full review for the Tempest Breaker audio drama. So that is part of the High Republic Phase 3 covering Lorna D. So that's, I feel like, a must read if you're following the High Republic. So that was a really fun one to talk about.
Yeah, I would agree. Like I was really like struggling. Should I say this is a must read? It just feels like if you're in the High Republic, I don't understand why you can't skip this, in my opinion. It's so transitionary to what happens going into phase 3 that it's essential.
I would at least call it an important read. I
Yeah.
mean, it's not like if you don't read it, you're going to be so lost and so confused and totally not knowing what's going on. But there's some important stuff that goes down in that one.
And then overall, you would say, yeah, positive. You liked it?
Yeah, I really liked it. And I mean, Lorna D is just so fun. I
Yeah.
feel like I could listen to her say or do anything and have a great time.
Yep. Yeah,
So
exactly.
that one I went into it figuring I would probably like it, and I did.
Yeah. I would agree too. Like I said, it was the best audio drama they've done so far, and I stick to that. It really is. The quality of the production, the acting is incredible. The story's amazing. That dance scene I've talked about where Lorna D's dance with Markion Rowe, it was just so like perfect. Again, I don't want to ruin anything or spoil anything tonight, but it was really, really great. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to that, get it as soon as you can. And I think in July is when we get the book version of the script as well. So you'll be able to get all the trivia out of that because there's a lot of little name droppings and all kinds of other stuff that are happening in that book. So, okay, cool. That's the business. All right. Now, one other thing before we get started into our breakdown of An Old Hope, I wanted to kind of kick the show off with, some Christmas stuff. And so a Christmas conversation. And so I asked you ahead of time to tell me, like, what are your top 3 Christmas movies? And they don't have to be, well, there's not really Star Wars related outside of the holiday special, but they can be really anything. But I'm just curious. And I wonder, and you and I are big Peanuts fans. So I hope that A Charlie Brown Christmas is in those top 3s. But start with your number 3. What's your number 3 movie?
So random, I have to say. So random that we both love Star Wars and Peanuts. Like,
Yeah.
there must be something in common there with those two things. Okay, so I actually almost pulled an Albert on this, and I started writing down a bunch of honorable mentions, and then
I have mine. I have mine.
Okay, well, if
Yep.
you have yours. I love Christmas movies, so this was kind of a hard decision. But my top 3 for now, I mean, this could change. Pretty much any version of A Christmas Carol, I love. I just love that story in general.
Mm-hmm.
I also love Nightmare Before Christmas, of course. Although debatable if it's a Halloween movie or a Christmas movie.
No, it's Christmas all the way, man.
But I always watch it at Halloween.
Well, you can watch it with both, but I think
Yeah.
I think at its heart, it's a Christmas movie though.
Okay, well, fair enough. And then also The Holiday. Gotta shout out Jude Law.
Oh my goodness, I've seen that movie and I actually like it, but that didn't make my list. But I'm glad it made yours.
I had
sure.
a lot of rom-coms I was considering, but I was like, I think The Holiday is probably the best. So yeah.
All right, so my top 3. Number 3, I have A Charlie Brown Christmas.
Yeah, gotta have that.
Number 2, I have A Christmas Story, simply because I grew up with that. I mean, it came out around the time I was at the same age, and there's a reason why that plays 24 hours straight over on TBS or TNT or whatever the heck it is they do now. Just a great movie.
Yeah.
And then my honorable mentions, I'm gonna rattle them off. I'm not gonna get into details, but Elf, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, Home Alone, Nightmare Before Christmas, Die Hard, which I consider a Christmas movie, Gremlins, which I consider a Christmas movie, and then I have Miracle on 34th Street as well. But my number 1 movie, Christmas movie, all times, it's like I have to watch it every year, even if I'm watching it by myself because everybody's passed out and I'm still wrapping gifts. It's A Wonderful Life. Like that movie, I mean, it's just a time-honored tradition, and I bawl like a baby every single time at the very end. I've seen it a billion times, and it still gets me every single time. But that is definitely my favorite one. And the other question I asked you to kind of kick us off in this Christmas spirit was, do you have any like fond memories of Christmas time where you were opening up gifts and got a Star Wars related Christmas gift?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, good.
I mean,
was like, oh God, if she says no, this is going to be a short segment, but go ahead.
No, I mean, so yeah, I've gotten lots of Star Wars Christmas presents throughout the year. I would say the most memorable ones are like, so when I was young and the prequels were coming out, and so I would get like the new prequel figures or the new prequel like ships or whatever they were coming out with at the time. Those were always a lot of fun. And then actually a recent one was, I mean, I guess now it's not really that recent. But when The Force Awakens came out, do you remember that BB-8 droid that they came out with that at the time it was like really innovative and you could control it with an app on your phone? And
Or
So
you
I
could buy
got
the
that.
little wrist thing to use to control it.
Yeah, it was like I mean, I feel like even still, I feel like it's a very fancy toy. So that was a pretty cool gift to get right when The Force Awakens came out, a little
Hmm.
BB-8. So that was pretty cool.
So Jonesy just stood up. It's a Sphero. I tell you, so
Yes.
after that came out, I bought 2 of the little wristband controllers. One I was going to convert into a watch because I just thought the look was really cool. And the other one, honestly, I've had it and I've never really done anything with it, but it's a really cool design and it looks like something right out of, the Galactic Empire era, or just post the Galactic Empire era. But that was a really cool gift, and it seemed like everybody had those things. It was really cool that people had them.
And it did make me feel like a kid again receiving that. Because,
Yeah.
it's like a
Oh,
toy,
yeah.
but it's like a fancy toy.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I had I wrote down 2 memories, and like you, I've had every year I get something from Star Wars. So I mean, it's been a prolific amount of Star Wars stuff that I get. But the oldest memories I have, I thought, well, maybe I'll just go with the oldest memories because as Alex said in the chat, and I'm talking about 1953 here. That's not true, but it's close. I think so after Star Wars came out in 77, the very next year is when I got my first Star Wars toys, and I got a lot of Star Wars toys that year. But I remember getting the very first X-wing and the TIE fighter that year, and I have a very faint memory of, at this point I was like 5-6 years old, turning the lights off after I'd gotten them, and my dad had the X-wing and I had my dad had the TIE fighter and I had the X-wing, and just turning the lights off, and it had like a little red light that flashed on the front of them, and that was it. It didn't do anything else. It played some sound effects and that sort of thing, but it was just something about that memory of the Christmas tree and the little red light, and chasing my dad around with the X-wing as he was running around with the TIE fighter. It was just amazing year to be a Star Wars fan, of course. And that same year, I also got a something called the Star Wars Duel at the Death Star racetrack, which was a racetrack that was just circular, and it would go around, and it was 2 cars. You had Darth Vader, you had Luke Skywalker, and I'm using air quotes here, cars. They didn't even look like, they were supposed to be like the ships, but they looked like cars with just, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but you had to pretend, you had to use your imagination that one was Luke Skywalker and one was Darth Vader, and they would go around the track, and what the idea was, you would try to catch up with the other person. If it rammed it in the back, the top would pop off. And it looked like it was supposed to be like the Death Star trench kind of thing. I don't know. It was very cool.
That's fun.
If you're really interested, go Google it or look up on eBay and take a look at it. But it was a lot of fun to just have that back again, circa 78, and playing with those toys. So yeah, I miss those toys. I actually, and as the course of like doing the research and thinking about this, I thought, maybe I'm going to go back and buy one of those now because I've got income. Right? I'm a grown man. I can go buy those things if I want to. And then I saw the price. I'm like, yeah, maybe I don't need that. But
it's funny because I still have all mine. I held on to all of them. All this time, I have all my Star Wars toys. So the toys in the background of a lot of my videos are probably toys from when I was a child.
The original ones. Yeah. 14 minutes into this episode, and I'm thinking these sweaters were a bad choice.
I have my heated blanket on right now, so I think you and I are living in a very different world.
Oh my God. I'm like burning up in here. This is a dumb choice. Okay. All right. Enough of that. Let's get into our breakdown of An Old Hope. And so for anybody that's not aware, this is, do you have the book in front of you or around by chance? So this is Life Day Treasury, right? This is a collection of short stories. There we go. Written by George Mann, Cavan Scott. I didn't see who wrote this one specifically. I couldn't tell if it was George Mann or if it was Cavan Scott. I know they contributed to both, but either way,
I felt like they both worked on all of them. That was the vibe I got. But
yeah, they probably did. They probably collaborated on this one. And I looked at Wikipedia. Didn't have any information on who was the actual writer. But this is a story, which is a funny story because last year we covered the Stellan Geo story, which is a very, very sweet story. If you're a High Republic fan, you got to read that story. It just really warms the heart. And I would say the same thing about this one, but this one is kind of special because it is the Santa Claus version of Star Wars. Now, don't freak out and think, oh my God, this is Earth and it's too, I don't know, whatever, like we're hearing a lot from the Skeleton Crew. It's actually told through the perspective of droids. So, you got to take that into consideration. The context there is that these are droids talking about this, and it's told as though it's a tall tale. But I think the one key thing, the really important thing that really brings this whole kind of story to life is the fact that we get a visit from Obi-Wan Kenobi, like an older Obi-Wan Kenobi, like just before A New Hope, sometime between Revenge of the Sith or after the Kenobi show, but before A New Hope, we get a little special cameo appearance of Obi-Wan Kenobi. And so that's kind of special in itself. But I guess just what are your quick opening thoughts? And we're going to get into like actually breaking it down and talking about the story and go through what actually happens in the story itself.
Yeah, I mean, overall, so what I loved about this story is there is like some silly moments in terms of like them describing quote unquote Santa Claus. Like there's some funny stuff in there, like he rides on a bantha, like
Yeah.
just ridiculous. But then there's also some really cute, sweet moments of the droid like helping the other droids and kind of like, getting into that Christmas spirit. Like, yeah, Santa Claus is part of it, but the real meaning of Christmas, being there for each other, that kind of thing. So I loved it that we had both of those things in the same story. And also it being from the perspective of the droids. It reminded me of that R5 story that you and I covered a while back.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Even though it's not R5, it's still very similar in terms of like getting inside the mind of a droid.
Right. Yeah. And all these stories are really great. And hopefully we'll continue to do more shows every year about Life Day Treasury. But I'd love to see them do another series of this. These are just a lot of fun to really kind of, break down and certainly talk about, especially, of course, during this time around Christmas time. So, all right. So let's get into the breakdown of the story. It's a very short story, too. So this probably won't be a very long episode, although, I can be long winded at times or most of the time. We open up on Mos Gofty, which is a new town on Tatooine. This is the first time it's ever been talked about. There's no other kind of mention of this prior in legends or anything like that. And we're introduced to an R2 droid that's red. And this droid's name is LAR1. And every time I read this as Larry. What were you in your head, I guess? Were you calling it R1?
So funny because I couldn't figure it out. I was sitting there trying to be like, how are they saying this out loud? Is it Law R1? Like nothing I was saying in my head sounded right.
Yeah.
So that's so funny that you bring this up because eventually I just gave up and I was like, okay, it's R1.
I'm sure they would call it R1, like R2, but in my head, I was reading Larry. So throughout the notes, I'm going to refer to this droid as Larry because I think that's even cuter. But
I like Larry. I think that works better than any of the ones that I came up with. So.
Especially in the context of the character and what we learn about him and just, all that. It makes it even cuter. All right. So it starts with this red R2 unit that I'm calling Larry. He's heading home. He went to Mos Gofty because he went to go find parts for his master. This master's name was Master Fedboard. And then he runs into Obi-Wan Kenobi, and they don't explicitly say his name, but they talk about an older guy with a beard, and he's wearing like a robe, and it just conjures.
And he touches his beard like Obi-Wan does.
Exactly. I mean, the imagery that's conjured up, it cannot be anybody else but Obi-Wan Kenobi, the older Ben Kenobi. And after they literally kind of run into each other, and I think Obi-Wan Kenobi is kind of like, lets the droid go by first, right? Because they kind of come to where a place where they're both, meeting each other, in the streets, if you will. And there's something about that moment that both the droid, when it rolls away, it's thinking, there's something about that guy. And when the droid turns around to look, Obi-Wan Kenobi's looking at the droid too. And there's just something about that human there's something about the human didn't feel right? There's some kind of sense there that they're both picking up on. I don't know. Any thoughts around, is that the Force working there? I would imagine it's on Kenobi's part. There's a debate that we've had on this show many times just for fun about whether or not droids can be Force sensitive or whether they're in tune with the Force, given how lifelike they are. But do you think the droid sensed anything there? Because it did kind of read as though he was feeling something that you don't normally get from droids.
I almost wonder, the way I took this is that Obi-Wan was sensing the Force, that something's not right, and Larry is reading Obi-Wan.
Okay.
And it's like Larry can tell by Obi-Wan's maybe his expression or his body language that Obi-Wan is concerned about something. But the reason that Obi-Wan was concerned is because of the Force. So that was kind of kind of a chain reaction, I guess.
Well, I'm ready to lump him into, I've already said R5D4 was Force sensitive. So, I'm ready to throw Larry in there as well, as far as I'm concerned.
I feel like I've gone back and forth on if droids can be Force sensitive or not. So sometimes I think they can, and sometimes I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I think when it makes sense for the story and backs up a theory I have, then yes, I'm for it. Otherwise, no, I'm absolutely
against it.
against
Well, that's the great thing about theories is you can adjust them as needed.
Yes, that's very true. So they kind of go about their own ways, right? And we'll don't worry, he comes back a little bit later. And so Larry's on his way. And unfortunately, as probably most droids worry about in the streets of any city on Tatooine, he ends up running into a Jawa that shoots him and cripples him, and he passes out. And he wakes up. So Larry wakes up now. This R2 droid wakes up, and he's in the middle of this sandcrawler. He's got a restraining bolt on him. There's all kinds of other droids around. And this is where we're introduced kind of like to the main cast of the story. Some really cool little droids in here. We've got a CZ droid, which is a communications droid. His name is 9R-NC. Again, I don't know how. I was just calling him 9R the entire time. And that was a very interesting droid because, as we'll learn here in just a second, he's missing an arm. And he's like he's actually the droid. When you look at the artwork, you can't see it because Lauren's covered up here on the right. She's covering it up there. But the artwork that Jonesy put together for us tonight has that CZ droid on there. There's one that you see during A New Hope that's kind of aimlessly walking around to the streets. It's a very creepy looking droid, quite honestly. But he's missing an arm. He's one of the main characters of this. But we also have like 2 PK droids, which are the little droids that you see at the very end of episode 1 that are kind of picking up parts. They're kind of like worker droids type things. There's an MSC-6 droid. There's a Treadwell droid. That's another one from like, A New Hope. There's a courier droid. And then we get a short range transport droid, an SRT, which looks like a floating droid with like really long arms. But nonetheless, all of these droids are kind of in there as well. They've all been captured here recently. They've all got restraining bolts on them. And the best part of this, not the best part, but one of the more memorable parts is it's really funny how that night they're all kind of sitting around talking about stories and talking about all their experiences that they've been through. And we get into, we learned a lot about 9RNC, which is the CZ droid. He's kind of a pessimistic, like he's like an AP5 kind of droid. Right? Like where everything's just like, wallowing in his own self-pity and morrow, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, he's really negative. But before we get into the whole story and what the premise of the story is, because it kind of comes through his eyes, what did you think about 9RNC?
I mean, I also feel bad for him because he's in this horrible sandcrawler, and I kind of got the impression that he's been here for a while. Is that also what you thought?
I think they said I think it might have been Larry who said that he kind of got the sense that he had been the droid that had been here the longest. And I'm like, well, buddy, with that kind of an attitude, yeah, nobody's going to want you, dude. You're like so pessimistic about everything.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
I know, it makes it even more pathetic.
Okay. Well, I feel sorry for him because maybe he's so negative because he's seen some horrible stuff. Like when he's talking about where they go, if they just want you for parts and they go to this terrible place where I'm guessing they just get taken apart. I mean, that would be so scary for that to be a possibility. So yeah, no, he's not helping the situation by being so like negative and scaring everybody with his stories. But at the same time, I was kind of like, he's probably seeing some stuff go down.
Yeah.
In his time. Yeah.
It's clear that he's had some bad experiences, especially with masters. He talks about their masters and how they're all, he's telling the other droids like, look, I don't know why you guys hold these, masters in such high esteem. They're all going to leave you, right? They're not really there for you. They're just going to work you till you're dead kind of thing until you don't run anymore. And he goes on to say, as he's talking about that, about how horrible humans are, I think it's one of the PK droids that brings up this concept of like, well, not all humans are bad. There is somebody called the oil bringer, which I was like, what in the world's an oil bringer? And then the PK droid goes into, and I'm going to read this really quick passage. It kind of sums up exactly, again, what the premise of this whole story is. But he says, the oil bringer, surely you know the stories. Once a year, a jolly old human travels the cosmos to ease the burden of droids everywhere. He oils joints, fixes logic boards, even soothes troubled motivators, right? So in droid land, in Star Wars, at least in this story, they have this concept of like a Santa Claus that goes around once a year. And instead of bringing presents and toys and cheer for everyone, they goes around specifically to droids and oils or joints and fixes parts and bad motivators and anything else that you got. But it's like almost like they've conjured up this tall tale as a way of hope. Like there's something hopeful about it, right? To kind of keep them going. And in some ways, as he's telling the story, some of the other droids are kind of like, yeah, I've heard about Oilbringer, right? And they keep adding to it. And other ones are kind of like, a little bit skeptical about whether or not this is really the case. And of course, 9RNC is making fun of all the droids. He believes none of this. He thinks this is just foolishness. It's, he talks about like some of the droids are like I think even one of that PK droids, I think he tells him like you're malfunctioning, you've gone completely crazy. And then one of the other PK droid, I don't remember if it's another one or the same one, goes on to say that the oil bringer visits all of the planets from one end of the galaxy
Yes.
all the way to the other, and then it gets kind of far-fetched, like you mentioned.
This made me laugh.
No, go ahead, you can take it, because this is where it gets kind of crazy.
Well, I just love it how they took something that sounds like it could be reasonable, and then they just dialed it up to 100. Like, why does he have to do this all in one night? And I mean, I guess that's Santa Claus for you.
Right.
And I love it how the other droids are like, what do you mean he goes to every planet in one night? This makes no sense. But they're like absolutely insistent. Like, no, it is all the planets in one night. So
on a flying bantha is where like someone adds like, yeah, I heard he goes around on a flying bantha, which is absolutely obscure.
And then they have a debate about if it's a flying bantha, which is one option, or if it's a pod racer powered by cybernetic cheer, which reminded me of Elf with the sleigh powered by Christmas cheer.
Yeah.
So yeah, I loved with the part when they were debating these just like ridiculous theories, because I mean, that's what Santa Claus is.
Yeah. and again, it's a way for them to kind of cope with the reality of them suddenly being prisoners and potentially being of no hope, because they don't have, they're trapped. They're on this sandcrawler now for God knows how long. And so they kind of, they go on, they're kind of talking about this, and eventually everybody goes to bed. Well, Larry is so inspired by this idea of the oil bringer that he decides that he wants to help all of the droids that night. And so he waits until all the droids are powered down, so they're not awake at this point, right? So this is almost like 'twas the night before Christmas when all through the sandcrawler. And he goes around and he takes whatever oil he's got left of himself, and he goes around and graciously oils as many of the droids as he can with it. And he even goes and replaces 9RNC's arm. So remember, he didn't have an arm. He finds an arm there. He bolts it on, repairs it, the entire thing. And he works all night long and is completely exhausted. He has like, again, no oil, I think he literally powered down and got like, I don't know, minutes of power up or minutes of sleep, if you will. So he's not even charged. But immediately after he falls asleep, they're attacked. The sandcrawler is attacked by something called a sand elk. Now, when I was reading the story, I thought, oh my gosh, is this like, the oil bringer? This is like, he's riding around on reindeer or something. It was interesting that there's an elk now on Tatooine, which I would never have thought. But nonetheless, there's a sand elk. And now imagine, this is not like your normal size kind of elk, like we would know it. This is like an elk that's about the size of a sandcrawler. It's massive. It's huge. It suddenly attacks it. It knocks over the sandcrawler. And the Jawas all jump out of the sandcrawler and they go try to attack the elk. And so they run off after the elk. It runs off into the desert. It's chased by all the Jawas, and the droids wake up and they realize, like, holy crap, like the little drawbridge thing, or the ramp has come down. The sandcrawler is now on its side, and it's kind of their moment to escape. And the best part, I guess, of the story is when they all wake up, all of these droids are like, they're all oiled, and 9R has got his arm replaced. And so they immediately freak out, and they're like, I think it's 9RNC says, maybe there was something in your stories of old oil bringer after all, the comms droid said, clambering from the wrecked crawler, because suddenly he's got an arm. Like, he's like, oh my gosh, we were all visited by the oil bringer, which was a cute way to kind of explain what was going on. Everybody but Larry, right? So this was like the sad part. Like, so all the droids take off except for Larry, because Larry has no oil. He's got no power. And he's really just kind of left and abandoned by all the people that he just helped, right? So you feel like, oh my gosh, he just did all this stuff and no one's going to be able to do anything for him.
Yeah, that was so sad. I mean, I guess it's just that they were all so excited that they were excited, and also they had an opportunity that they had to act on quickly. So they just all ran out of there and didn't even realize. I don't think they even realized he was still back there.
No, I think they left him unfortunately.
Yeah, no, that was really sad. But I loved it that he went around and fixed everybody. That was kind of the part I was referencing earlier about, like, the true meaning of Christmas.
Exactly.
Helping each other, being there for each other. So I liked it that part was in there. It's not just a silly story about Santa Claus, it's also Larry being like, I want to raise everybody's spirits and do what I can to help with everybody being in a horrible state on this terrible sandcrawler. And I mean, if it wasn't for him, they wouldn't have been able to escape.
Right.
So, I mean, he really did make a big difference by doing that.
Yeah. And in true tradition of Christmas stories, he's going to be rewarded, which kind of segues into the last part of the story, because as he's laying there, he's actually waiting to die. Like he's thinking like, this is it. Like the sandcrawler's gone. The Jawas are gone. They actually do come back. The Jawas come back. Oh, no, I'm sorry. No, the Jawas don't come back. No, they do. I'm sorry. They do. The Jawas come back.
He's too beat up. And,
yeah.
Yeah.
It was so sad. Like he's got no power. He's worthless. I mean, they look at him as pretty much just, salvage at this point, right? There's no reason to take him. He's not going to be any good to anybody, right? And so it goes back to that your worth kind of thing. And so he's sitting there. He's been abandoned by his droids that he just helped. He's been now abandoned by the Jawas because they've all taken off because the sandcrawler can't go anywhere. And then to make that matters worse, the elk comes back. And the elk comes back and there's like this terrifying moment where it like rips open the side of the hull on the storage bay, which is where Larry's sitting there, powered down and literally just dying, right? Waiting to be powered off or power off. And he opens his eyes and suddenly the elk starts to rise up into the air. And then the elk just flings off to the side.
So there is
some
a
incredible
flying
speeds.
Reindeer.
Right, there is. I hadn't considered that, but that's
I
great.
hadn't thought about that until just
That's
now
true.
when you were saying that.
We got a flying reindeer because some mysterious, let's call it a force, some mysterious force lifts up this sand elk, throws it off to the side. And when he opens his eyes, he sees an old man, and it's the old man from Mos Gofty who says, of course, hello there. And it's Obi-Wan Kenobi that's come back. The old man then lifts him up along with a bunch of stuff and kind of moves him to a safe space and then goes out and grabs oil. And that doesn't really say where he gets the oil from, but the old man comes back and starts, fills him up with oil, gets him puts him back up on his feet and removes the restraining belt again with the Force. He's able to take that off. And Obi-Wan Kenobi then says, now shall we see about getting you home? I'm sure you don't want to miss any gathering of the clans, do you? Fedbird would be wondering where you are. Now, I don't know why. It never explains how Kenobi knew who his master was. And that's really not important, right, in the course of the story. But I do like the idea, or the fact that Kenobi did know. And there was something about, again, the Force, the intervening with him or, speaking to him in a way that said, I should probably keep my eye on what's going on with that droid, because there was something about that chance random encounter that we had at the very beginning of the story that was enough for him to kind of be there in the end when he needed him the most. So.
Santa Claus knows everything, so maybe he was on the nice list, and that's how he knew.
He made the nice list that night for
yeah.
sure. Yeah. And so the story ends with this final passage. It says LAR1 or Larry had no idea how the bearded man knew about the gathering or even where his master had lived. But he was certain of one thing as the hooded figure led him from the sandcrawler into the star-filled night. The oil bringer of legend was most definitely real. And I love that fact that his last moment, like he thinks that Obi-Wan Kenobi is Santa Claus. And when you think of old Ben Kenobi played by Alec Guinness in episode 4, that's probably the closest we have to, a Santa Claus. And so it's a very cute story. And that's it. That's how it ends. I loved it. I love the fact that we got droids doing really good things for other droids. We have this story that's filled with like hope and this idea that there was a Santa Claus somewhere in space, at least from the droids' perspective. But at the center of all this is Obi-Wan Kenobi, which, you and I both absolutely love. And, what a way to kind of put a nice proverbial bow on the story. But any thoughts, I guess, what are your final thoughts on anything there?
I mean, yeah, love that it's Obi-Wan. I feel like that fits really well, especially the way that, he has all the little mannerisms. It's never said that he's Obi-Wan, but there's no missing it. So I loved that. And I loved that, it's like Christmas cheer and the Jedi way have a lot in common in this story. So I loved seeing how that kind of works out. Because really, that's how the oil bringer legend starts, is it's just Obi-Wan going around doing the right thing and trying to help people and droids and kind of whoever he comes across that needs it. And so just doing that created this whole Santa Claus style legend. So I like it that we see those two things kind of coming together here.
Yeah. Now, Music Train, I think, has corrected me. He says Rex could be Santa Claus. I hadn't considered that. Yeah.
Yeah,
He's
that
a little
also
bit-
would work.
A little bit chubbier, a little bit more jolly, a little bit more shake when he laughs kind of guy than Obi-Wan Kenobi in A New Hope. But
They should write a clone Santa Claus
there you go.
story.
Yeah, like a follow-up story
Yeah.
where Rex does something and it continues to perpetuate this legend of the oil bringer throughout the galaxy. That'd be kind of fun.
Just
and
another version. Yeah.
Another version of it. So, but yeah, great story. And again, great book. Pick it up. Came out, almost 4 years ago at this point, but there's still some really good stories in there that we continue to revisit and do a lot of there. So any final thoughts on this or anything else on the holidays or anything else on your mind?
No, I mean, like we said, I loved the story. And I feel like one thing I love about this collection is that you can see one thing I also liked about this story and the story we read last year and just kind of other ones I've looked at is you can see the influence of classic Christmas stories and classic Christmas movies on these too. So if you're a fan of Christmas movies, then you'll probably find some little Easter eggs in these stories too. So that's kind of just like another fun dimension to it.
Yeah. And I would say this too, like Star Wars, especially now these days, can sometimes be a drag. You and I were talking before we came on air about, all the discourse that was going on with the Acolyte. And it feels like things are in a better place now, at least temporarily, with Skeleton Crew, because there seems to be a larger, wide appeal to that show. But it's stories like this that really kind of make me fall in love with Star Wars all over again. It's fun to read these things and just have fun with Star Wars, even if this isn't real. And it is a tall tale. It is a legend of sorts, especially now during the Christmas time when things should be happy. We should all be jolly and we should be merry and we should be thinking about other people. And it's just a nice reminder that even these things were happening a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So
Agreed. I mean, for me, the more wholesome side of Star Wars is definitely what I like to lean towards, especially during Christmas time. So I feel like this collection does a really great job of doing that.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's see. Before we get out of here, I know you want to say thank you to everybody that joined us on the live stream tonight. Who was that?
Yes. So thank y'all for joining. Tonight we had Steph, my Star Wars guys, Music Train, One Up vs. CPU, Sky, Alex, and Jonesy.
Yeah. And if you guys are interested in following us on YouTube, you can head out to cantinacast.com/YouTube or youtube.com/cantinacast. Please like this video, leave us a comment down below, let us know what you thought about the story. If there's anything else you want to talk about as far as Christmas, hey, I'd love to hear what your top 3 Christmas movies are as well, if you didn't already put them in the chat. And then, please subscribe to the channel. That way you guys don't miss anything else that we do anytime we go live. We do record all of our shows live on YouTube, and we love for you guys to interact as much as we can. We do throw up comments and answer questions as time permits throughout the recording. So it's a fun way to interact and engage with the content that we're putting out. And then if you're interested in Patreon, you can head out to cantinacast.com/Patreon. Just a reminder, after the show, Jonesy and I will be back at the top of the hour at 10 p.m. Central. And we are going to do a deep dive into Atten, which is the main location for Skeleton Crew, which has really struck up a lot of debate. We're going to get it through all the facts that we know about and then speculate on why some of the things are the way they are, because that is kind of a mystery all into in itself. So super excited to break that down. So again, cantinacast.com/Patreon if you guys want to follow us on that show. Let's see. Alex says, thought this was going to be a dramatic reading. Nope, sorry, not tonight. And One Up vs. CPU says they're all just Batman movies. I guess he's saying all his favorite Christmas movies are all Batman movies. So, all right, Lauren, any final thoughts or anything else before we get out of here?
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas to everybody. We'll see you, for those of you staying on with us. Again, we'll see you here in just a few minutes. Otherwise, don't forget, on Wednesday, we'll be breaking down episode 3 of Skeleton Crew. That'll be a 9 p.m. Central breakdown with Jonesy and I. We hope to see you guys there, and we'll see you all here very, very soon.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good fun stuff. But I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what. So that's your disclaimer.